The great thing about the 5205G is that they've designed this case so it can be worn by almost any wrist. I was lucky to come across this at the authorized dealer. It was that deep, rich blue dial that was the first thing that caught my attention. And then it was the sector dial design and the numerous complications which kept my attention and pulled me in even further. The design cues of this watch are distinctly Patek Philippe, from the hands and hour markers to the date windows to the subdial and the moon phase indicator. But it was the size of this watch that gave me some pause in the beginning, because it's 40 millimeters in diameter and I have a 6.5-inch wrist. But that 40 millimeter number can be deceiving, and once you actually put this on the wrist, you immediately know that this watch is for you. This watch has been designed to wear like a smaller watch, like a 38 or a 39 millimeter watch. But at the same time, it maintains the presence and weight of a larger watch. So if it's possible for a watch design to produce two opposite effects, then Patek Philippe has done it. It comes down to the unique design of the bezel, the sides of the case, the curvature of the lugs, and the lug design itself. I'll explain this further, but first I'll take this 5205G out to lunch and show that you can wear this on casual occasions, and this dress watch can be dressed down. The 5205G has been on catalog for a few years now. It also comes in a rose gold version. So I'm wondering if this reference number will be up for discontinuation soon. I'll briefly mention the specifications. For case size, it has a diameter of 40 millimeters, a height of 11.36 millimeters, and water resistant to 30 meters. It has a sapphire crystal case back, which is see-through, which displays the internal movement. The case is made of white gold, and the dial is a sunburst blue dial, which gradually shifts into a darker color towards the periphery. Let's go into the details about what makes this watch wearable for my smaller wrist. Number one, it has a bezel, which will slightly reduce the dial diameter, which will make this watch look smaller than a 40 millimeter. And it's not just any bezel, it's a concave bezel, which will reduce the mass of this watch and make it look not so tall. Number two, the sides of the case are scalloped, so they have a very similar effect in giving this watch a more streamlined look, but also giving it beautiful curves at the same time. And lastly, the lugs are curved downwards and conform to the wrist. So it gives the effect of the watch wrapping around your wrist, giving the effect of a smaller watch. These lugs also provide a third way of reducing mass. The lugs are actually hollowed out, so you can actually see through these lugs. So if you take into consideration all of these design features, you can see how they all combine to produce a smaller looking watch and a lighter watch. You can see how they fit all those complications into a case that doesn't look overly large on my small wrist. Let's compare this to another dress watch that does not have these design features, the Calatrava 6119G. Another beautiful dress watch from Patek Philippe, but this one has a very thin design and it does not have those extra complications. But this 6119G is actually smaller in diameter. It's 39 millimeters, but it actually wears like a larger watch because of the way that the case is designed. Almost the opposite of the 5205G. Number one, it has the bezel, which is a very slim bezel, so it gives extra room for the dial to expand and make it look larger. The sides of the case are very flat and do not have that extra flourish of design, and the bezels are flatter and they do not curve down or hug the wrist. So overall, the watch is very flat and wears very flat on the wrist. Another thing to look at is the lug width. The 6119G has a 20 millimeter lug width, while the 5205 has a 19 millimeter. And even this 1 millimeter difference has an impact on how big the watch head looks, just like it did on the Explorer 36. On the 5205G, the 19 millimeter lug width makes the watch case look slightly smaller, but not too small. So no, these two watch straps are not interchangeable. And by the way, yes, I did have to purchase a size small watch strap on each to get the right length for my 6.5-inch wrist. So even though this is a 39 millimeter diameter watch, again, the number can be deceiving. And this watch wears actually larger than the 5205G on my wrist, in my opinion. So in retrospect, I would actually have preferred if the Calatrava 6119G was was in an even smaller diameter, such as 37 or 38. Both still have a place in the collection, but looking at all the fine details of the 5205G, it makes me appreciate how well this watch is designed and how well it sits with a smaller wrist. It's one of the very few Patek Philippe watches that are still suitable for a small wrist, along with my newest one, the 4947A. Let me know in the comments, are smaller watches ever coming back? They've been saying that they're making a comeback every year for the past 2 or 3 years, but I haven't seen it yet. I think the larger watches are here to stay for many more years. This week's question from the comments comes from Novalicious, and he writes, my grail is the 5905 triple calendar chronograph in rose with a blue strap. By the way, may I ask your opinion on the calendar chronographs? I've always adored that complication, but not sure if others like it as much as I do. Thanks for the question, but I'm not too familiar with the 5905. Haven't really seen it in person. But yes, both of these look great in pictures. The rose gold version looks bright and bold, so I would have to see that in person. But the dial design has some similarity to my 5205, and at 42 millimeters, I think this watch would definitely be too large for me. A chronograph would be nice to have. Another option for a chronograph would be a 5172G. But this dial design has some similarity to my 4947A, and also at 41 millimeters, this might also be too large for me. So if I didn't have my current watches and my wrist was larger, then yes, I would definitely be interested in a calendar chronograph. I wanted to mention one more thing about Patek Philippe, which I did not even notice until one of my viewers brought it to my attention, and that's regarding their automatic movements. While they do make great movements, there is some sound coming from inside the case as the self-winding rotor spins around its axis. And you can actually hear it if you put it against your ear and just shake the watch gently. I've tested this myself, and it's not just a defect of this watch. I can hear the same sound at the same volume across all four of my self-winding Patek Philippe watches. I'll try to demonstrate this by holding the watch up close to the microphone and gently shaking it, and you'll hear the rotor spinning. You may have to increase your volume. So if you're hearing your rotor spin on your Patek Philippe, much more noticeable than a Rolex, it's not a defect. All of the Patek Philippe watches seem to do that. It's just how they're made.